Good morning, everyone. The nice thing about the Institute's fascination with video is you get to age publicly, like it's over the years. Great. So if you want to see me with no gray hair, go back a few years. Thanks for joining us. This is meant to be an open conversation around philanthropy, and I think that when we look at the philanthropic space, often it isn't that money is so much of an issue, right? We tend to think that a lot of the problems, if we only had funding, they'd go away. But in fact, just in the United States, in 2015, which is the last year we have good data on, $373 billion was given to charitable causes. So that means every few years, $1 trillion is going into charity. Here in the US, there's 1.6 million different charitable organizations that have nonprofit status. I'll go out on a limb here. There can't possibly be 1.6 million distinct needs that are being funded. So there's a lot of duplication in the space. And if we would only create a wave of M&A activity to sweep through and like rip out some of those expenses and target more dollars towards the cause, it might create a more efficient model. And that's really the gist of what we're going to be discussing today. You know, are you treating philanthropy like a business? Because it is, just because it's a nonprofit. In the United States, again, some 11% of the entire workforce, including universities and hospitals, works in the nonprofit space. So I think that when I look at what donors are doing, I advise them to think of their philanthropy as they would their investment portfolio. You need diversification. You need to pick winners that have the best chance of succeeding in a competitive environment. And you need to have predetermined efficacy metrics so that you can evaluate your success and then understand the time frame and time horizon that you're going to keep funding. You know, at some point, if you're the only one funding an initiative, maybe it wasn't such a good idea, or there's another organization that's out there doing something similarly. So I want to start with that theme of like treating your philanthropy like a business. And I want to go first to you, Tom, because I know that as part of your foundation, you have set aside 5% to evaluate the efficacy of what you're doing. So tell us how you came up with that and how you go about doing that.
Yeah, morning everybody. Well, first of all, you know, my journey has been from starting a business to being very lucky, selling it for a great deal of money and then working out what to do. So this thing called philanthropy was a bit daunting. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to learn a whole bunch of new skills, and goodness, it's a new language. And I think it was my dad, who was still around at the time. He said, look, son, in your business life, you don't write a check and hope for the best. So why don't you do the same? So treat your philanthropy as you would your business. And I guess that was the thing that said, right, well, I know how to do that. And is it okay to do it in philanthropy? So he kind of gave me the permission to do that. And therefore, we are constantly saying, and so first of all, we are looking for the same sort of entrepreneurial minds that we do in our money-making side. But some of the best entrepreneurs I've ever met are in the philanthropy sector. They're just blow us away.
Well, they have to be scrappier generally.
Yeah. So that's the first thing to say, is we're looking to back talent always. And we set it out in the beginning, say, right, what is it you want to do? How long is it going to take? And what does success look like? And then we break it into 6, 12, 18, 24, whatever it is, and we drip feed the money in. So you said you were going to be here, Rich, in 6 months. Are you? Yes, no, maybe. And we really work with the entrepreneur and the charity to try and help. And sometimes there's some very tough decisions to make to say, you know, this just ain't going to work. And I would say we're probably even tougher in the foundation than we are in West Coast Capital, which is our money-making side, because it's more important. And that sometimes comes with some interesting conversations. But how do we come up with 5%? We made it up. We're kind of making this up as we go along. And
but I think the good part of that is there was some intentionality at the inception of thinking through. You weren't going to just randomly fund initiatives. You were going to evaluate how they were doing.
Yeah. And one of the things that you may tell from the accent, I'm from Scotland, so a long way from home. So one of the things we do in Scotland, because Scotland's a relatively small place, we can work with government. And so we do things there where we pilot, we prove, and then the government adopts it as policy. So with that, there's a great deal of metrics and measurement because then we're going on to the public purse. So it's okay me wasting my money, but I would say we're the kind of venture round, to take the business analogy. So we will take the risk because governments don't like taking risks and they hate admitting failure because they ain't going to get re-elected. But we don't mind, well, we do mind. I mind a lot. But we're willing to take those risks to prove something. So we pilot, prove, and hopefully it then gets adopted. So therefore measurement is just part of, it just makes common sense, Richard.
But I think that's an interesting point because philanthropic capital can often be catalytic and take disproportionate risk that other types of capital don't. And I think when you're thinking how to get involved in the beginning, how does one start? So thinking across the whole landscape of causes that need funding, I think other types of philanthropy people toe into based upon their interests or passion. But medical philanthropy tends to come to you because you're immediately affected. So David, let me turn to you for a moment because that is your story. When your daughter was diagnosed with diabetes, tell us when you did a landscape analysis, tell us what you found and then how you went about deciding to start funding.
Sure. So as you mentioned, philanthropy found me. I was doing commercial real estate in New York City and knew nothing about philanthropy or medical research. My daughter was diagnosed with type 1 a little over 10 years ago, and I literally knew nothing. And now I get invited to panels like this to give talks, so it's kind of ironic. But just a brief background on type 1. It's an autoimmune disease where your body kills its insulin-producing cells. Without insulin, you die. It's as simple as that. It's the only disease I know of where patients and caregivers are making decisions, dosing decisions with a drug that can kill you, and you're making those decisions 24/7 without the benefit of a clinician. And if you get it right 60% of the time, you're doing amazing. So we have really imperfect tools. So I started out 5 months after my daughter was diagnosed, I became a trustee of what's now a $5.5 billion foundation. Not such a subtle message as to what I should be doing with my life. And I started out on a learning tour. And we did diligence for 18 months before we wrote our first check. The reality is, at least in medical research, what you're basically doing is making really as educated guesses as you can. If we knew what to do, we'd be done. It's not for lack of effort. It's not for lack of money. More money certainly helps, but the truth is medical research is really hard. So we spent a lot of time with some disease-specific organizations that have a business approach that were having an impact to their disease. And the two that come to top of mind that I spent a lot of time with is Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. I think they're the poster child for what we're all striving to do, which is to have a major impact on our disease. Michael J. Fox Foundation is another one, multiple myeloma. So we spend a lot of time understanding the landscape, and I think that's crucial. So it's not just the disease-specific organizations. You need to understand what industry is doing in the space, what they want, what they're funding, and more importantly, what they're not funding and why, and see if there's a role for us to kind of de-risk it to get them to play in our space. Type 1 is, I always say it's not an orphan disease, it's a tweener disease. We're not type 2, where a lot of big pharma have the business incentives to get there. Type 1 doesn't share that benefit. So we really want to understand the industry landscape, know what they're going to do, and see if there's an opportunity for us to influence what they'll get involved with.
Great. So where there is a pool of other organizations from which to draw learning, I think that can help inform your own philanthropic decisions. But Belinda, let's go to you for a moment because you operate in a part of the world, Indonesia, where there aren't necessarily enough organizations to effect the change you're trying to. So tell us how you and your family's foundation have approached that without other NGOs and the like to hand money to.
Yeah, so philanthropy is a relatively new thing in Asia. So 8 years ago when we decided we want to do work with rural communities, we couldn't find a not-for-profit that that fits with what we want to do, as well as that has the same accountability that we expect. So we made the decision to deliver our own programs. So right now we have about 70 people on the ground delivering programs to rural schools, doing teachers training, developing school principals, the leadership capability, as well as building libraries. But we thought we were going to start from scratch, but we were lucky because our business has a long-standing history of operating in rural Indonesia. So we leveraged on that expertise when we, decided to do the foundation side. But we also realized by delivering the programs directly, while we have deep and measurable impact, it's very hard to scale. I mean, we're only working with 300 schools, and there are 300,000 schools in Indonesia. And 300 schools, we already have so many people. So we are now thinking, we're also shifting gears. We're thinking about how can we seed new organizations and help them scale up so that we can achieve scale in Indonesia. And a lot of it boils down to what Tom was saying about betting on the team and betting on the entrepreneur. Because if you think it's hard to make money in a developing country like Indonesia, it's even harder to do good. So a lot of what we do now is working closely with entrepreneurs, leaders who have a very unique model and approach in improving the quality of education in Indonesia and help them scale up.
Okay, great. So, Dominika, you've experienced Los Angeles traffic, I understand.
Yes, so sorry. Los Angeles time. I thought everybody's going to be relaxed. And everybody was probably on the streets. Sorry.
So, thanks for making it here. Tell us, again, following up on with Belinda operating in a different part of the world, you have very widespread initiatives across Asia, Africa. Tell us how you find those projects, like what bubbles up and catches your interest enough to fund it.
Well, my family foundation is fairly young foundation, but what I think is a bit different in our model, and I've chosen this precisely because I really believe that is the model which is good, which I can say that I can really contribute to. This model is about partnership, and this model is about leadership. So we don't spend huge money on projects, but we spend a huge effort on building good partnerships, as we've always done in my company, in family company. So we have over 100 partnerships around the world in around 40 countries, and we usually pick small organizations with strong leaders, and believing that those people really know what a society's need. I really think that in today's world we kind of struggle with a leadership issue, don't we? Right? We can really see it that whoever is really in charge is creating the world on a big scale and a small scale. So since I believe in that, I believe that you also have to empower people and give them the chance so they can choose themselves. Patronizing people who are in need, I think it's the worst thing which we can ever do. And we've done it as NGOs and foundations last years after the Second World War. We kind of really did a lot of mistakes because we've been patronizing and we've been thinking that we know better because we have those know-hows and tools and we're that wise and that rich, right? So I try hardly to really always look for wonderful leaders, great NGOs, not huge ones, because the huge ones are quite difficult to work with, honestly. There's a lot of bureaucracy as well. And with the small ones, you kind of feel like, because there is this strong will, there is this need to be recognized, and treated with respect, and there is this need to be believed in. Once you give it to them, wow, you change so much. So we build partnerships, that's the key thing. We, of course, evaluate these NGOs, who we pick with the strong leaders and a big impact. We use on this, in this part of our job, we use a professional business tools to make a due diligence. We look into this organization. Professional people do it, and I've built a professional team. But we try to keep things very personal, very true, hands-on. And I would go to those places myself and check these projects. I would even take my kids so they can see and learn and see how the world real is.
So I think that's an interesting point because some of those smaller organizations can be more agile and there is an attendant bureaucracy as size increases. But on the other side, sometimes you need size to affect scale. So David, I want to jump to you because when you were approaching diabetes, there actually were organizations that had been in the space for a very long time.
Yep.
So why not just write a big check to JDRF or another organization that was doing it?
Well, the really cynical part of me would say they've been around for a really long time and their one job is to put themselves out of business. Not a fair statement, but definitely a thought that crossed my mind. We really started approaching it, and to be honest, at the beginning we were frenemies. There was some friction, and eventually we're now really good partners. But I think we really came to understand what our role in the system is. And I believe the fact that JDRF's our public charity in the space. We don't have to fundraise. In my mind, that obligates us to think differently. That obligates us to take more risk. That obligates us to do things that others can't or won't. And I can give you a really good example. We started out trying to figure out where the data set is on people living with this disease. And it turned out, other than a few different siloed data sets, it didn't really exist, and you couldn't get at the data. So we went about and built what's now called the T1D Exchange. In a nutshell, it's a registry that has over 27,000 patients, well characterized. It has a biobank and it has a patient community. We always say we were building it while we're flying it, which is never a good model, but there is no model to do what we were doing. So we certainly made mistakes. It cost, by the time we were done building it, and it's still ongoing, and running trials and seeding it, it cost well over $100 million, and it took well over 2.5 years to build. So the public charities who have to fundraise to perpetuate themselves could not have taken that on. It cost too much money. It didn't have results. I can tell you though, 10 years ago, type 1 was a completely misunderstood disease. It was thought of to be safe and managed disease. You take your insulin, you're fine. We have now created the body of evidence to show you that less than 30% of people are actually achieving outcomes set by the ADA. Almost 10% of people in the clinics, so keep in mind the clinics are the best care we have in this country, almost 10% of them are having a severe low blood sugar every year. 10%, and those cost real money. You end up in an ER, it's $20,000, $25,000, and that assumes you don't get admitted. So we've kind of figured out our role and our kind of niche in the ecosystem. We are an open book. We meet with JDRF all the time. We meet with the NIDDK all the time, and the FDA as well.
So on that data point, where you have a patient population, right, there's data to bubble up. But Tom, in some of the work you do in Africa and elsewhere, where there might not be readily available statistics, how do you think about data, using it, and doing some metrics around that?
Yeah, well, obviously, if there is data available, it's wonderful. But sometimes you got to go with your gut feel as well, and it's one of the great privileges of, and it's something we have a saying in our foundation that he who has the pesos has the say-sos. And I know it's an incredibly privileged position to be able to say it, and I don't say it glibly, but sometimes we just got to go, I like what this person's doing, let's just see. And of course we get it wrong, but we always go a step further from there. And I was taken, we were at a panel this morning, I think you were there, and we talked about, the former Prime Minister of Finland talked about reverse mentorship, which I'd never heard before. But it kind of struck me, this is what we're actually doing. We're trying to find people who don't come with the baggage of saying, yeah, well, we want to create change, but yeah, so people will say, yeah, but what about this, and these are all barriers. So one example of it is we're working with a young man who has been homeless, but he's got himself through being homeless, and he's actually a brilliant entrepreneur, and he's coming up with a system which is so radical and working with the Scottish Government, we could actually transform the homelessness policy. So it got me thinking, who's best to write a policy? Is it, quite frankly, a middle class person who's never been homeless in their life, well educated, or is it someone who's been through it, been there, did it, done it, understands what works, what doesn't work the hard way, but is able to articulate that, so what they need is a bit of a help. So that's where we come in. So I actually got together a group of disruptors, as I call them, and we had a dinner with the First Minister of Scotland and the Deputy First Minister, and I said, these are people you need to meet, because they don't accept the status quo, and they are not asking for more money. They're asking for the resources to be looked at in a different way and applied in a different way. And that, frankly, costs me nothing. But that could be a huge change in my country.
Mm-hmm. And that dynamic between giver and recipient is something we spoke about the other day at the session. How did Belinda tell us about that? So, one, you're going into impoverished areas where there might not be the same educational opportunities for girls as boys. Like, you're changing systemic risk in what you're trying to accomplish, and yet education necessarily resides with the government largely. So, how do you work amongst those things?
I think it's important to think about sustainability and the sustainability of the program and the scalability of the program from the beginning. So there needs to be some intentionality built into the design. A lot of what we do is doing the proof of concept and experimenting. And then after that, once we have proven that, we pass it on to the government. Because we can only, compared to the government budget, the philanthropic dollar is only so small. I think so that's why we think that in philanthropy, one of the things that we can do is help take some of the risks that the government's not willing to take to experiment, and some of the things that the commercial side, the market-based solutions, are not willing to take. But I want to go back to the data point and what philanthropy can do in addressing that data gap. So one of the things that we're trying to do, in Indonesia, it's very hard to come across data. And so one of the things that we're trying to do now in Indonesia is to work together, and there are a lot of donors working in education, in the field of education in Indonesia. We're doing to do a market scan as to where is the money going, is it effective, what are some of the current gaps in the system, and unlike organizations that are fundraising, we're able to do this more systems level contribution, right? Because we're not, we don't have to show that where we're doing, we don't have to fundraise. So I think some of the things that we're able to do allows that flexibility to add to the systems from the data point of view, from the evidence point of view, from the research point of view. And a lot of this, the important part is also the process. So making sure that having a diverse stakeholders, so not just the foundations, but also the not-for-profits that are doing work in education, and coordinating and sharing resources.
And getting that message out, right, to create the scale, because to your point, the philanthropic dollars collectively in the entire world are but a fraction of what governments can do. So getting this message out and getting people empowered to participate is important. And I know, Dominika, you've had something called the domino effect, which is kind of getting the message out. Tell us about that.
Well, domino effect is one of the keywords in my philanthropy activity. First of all, if you help to make people the first step, you empower them so they can go on by themselves feeling great that I did it themselves. It's again domino effect. It's like when you're helping a society to build a bridge, you do it together with them. First you do it because you've learned that they really need it, and the bridge can change everything. It's connecting to sides of the river, so kids living on one side can go to school because there is a bridge. People who have their fields on one side of the river, but on the other side there's a market, they can trade. If the people live on one side and hospitals on the other one, the bridge can save lives. So you just come over there, and we do it with a restricted fund, just to do a project. And this is the first thing you do, and this is like domino effect. But the other way I'm trying to make domino effect change the world is because also using the domino effect logic, I'm spreading the news. So what I've done is, because I've always wanted to be a war reporter, and Oriana Fallaci was my role model and hero when I was a teenager, I just always wanted to do something about changing the world by spreading the message. I just believe that, some people are here to share the story, and I really believe stories can change the world. So what I've done after I had this idea, actually couldn't really make it. I've decided to be a mom to my kids and spend a couple of years just being for them. But somehow, if you know that you are here to do a certain thing, then you really have to do it. You can't skip it. So after some couple of years of kind of getting prepared myself to do it, I decided, okay, no more war reporting now. But poverty is like war for some people. If they're living in a terrible conditions, that they're struggling every day to survive. It's like being in a war. But you're not in a gunfire, so it's like much safer from the reportage side of you. So what I did was I kind of connected my passion to share the stories, and I always wanted to be a reporter. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do reportage, but it's going to be on poverty. And so that was a bit selfish, but really, because I've loved this idea, I did everything to make it happen. What is the most important thing? I really believe in that. This the TV documentary series is called Domino Effect, because it is really working like domino effect. What happens is, last 4 years, 3.5, I've recorded 32 documentaries from 32 places, 32 NGOs, projects, leaders. So 32 really moving social stories, and they're broadcasted in Polish TV, also in Chinese TV and Ukrainian TV. But what happens is, my dream is to make everybody humanitarian, because every Sunday, over 1 million people watching that, and there are people who are, out of those millions who are watching, they're sitting there and thinking, my God, why I'm not doing anything with what I'm seeing happens in the world. First of all, now I learn what does the situation look like, what do people struggle with. Secondly, God, I can do something about it, because, well, I feel that it's my story as well, that it is touching me. It's important, I care. And the third thing, well, maybe I just, get up off this couch and do something. And there was this girl, for example, I've got stories like this, many of them, coming over to me on one of the lectures I was giving. And she's coming to me and she said, I've always wanted to be a dentist in Kenya, and I've always wanted to heal kids. But there was always something, I got engaged, I got married, or then I had some other stuff. I was traveling, and there was always something. I've never really decided to do it. And you know what? After seeing the Domino Effect, the documentary in a TV, during the Sunday morning, I just decided, gosh, that's a sign, that's a moment, I finally have to do it. And you know what? In a week, I'm heading off to Kenya. I've got my passport, I've got everything ready. I've got a place I'm planning to go, and I'll be there doing what I've always wanted to do. I'm going to make my dream come true. Wow. So this is a wonderful thing for me to hear such stories. This is domino effect. Short impact maybe, but, well, short project maybe from my perspective, but long outcomes. This is what I
Well, and that's that notion of being a catalyst and affecting change in a very different way. I want to pivot towards how you overcome disappointment in giving, because I think that's important. And in a field like you're trying to, David, cure diabetes, I mean, absent the cure, how do you get up in the morning and think of continuing to fund, right? Because the only success you're really looking for is so evasive, but you still have to get doctors into the lab every day, and it's a frustrating exercise. So how do you think about that?
So I personally believe cure is a fundraising word. I think that we have not cured any chronic diseases that I'm aware of. As a parent, I hope I'm wrong. I want a cure for my daughter. But if we find the secret sauce tomorrow, it's 15 or 20 years before that's ever going to be a therapy in any of our children. So I think we really focus on two things. One, how do we improve care to make this disease easier to manage, ease the burden of managing the disease, so that if we ever find this elusive cure, they're healthy enough to participate. I think as a general statement, that the media, everybody overhypes. You hear cure all the time. To me, cure is you wash your hands like you never had the disease, you go live your life. That's how I would define cure. And I just think that we get really caught up with the word. So at the Helmsley Type 1 Diabetes Program, what we really focus on two things. We focus on improving care and ultimately primary prevention. And primary prevention, what that is it's preventing the disease before autoimmunity ever happens. And we are in the middle of building a very large clinical trial platform in Europe where we're going to screen general population screening of about 400,000 newborns. And we're going to genetically type all of them, and we're going to intervene on all of them that are at risk to get diabetes. And the vision for this is not just to build this huge thing for type 1 diabetes, because that would be insane, not to mention extremely expensive, but to have it be a platform where other disease groups can come in and you screen for other diseases that happen early on in life. And that's kind of our vision. Now, many people come up to us and say, why are you only doing it in type 1? And the reality is, a lot of people give you advice. When you ask them for money to join in, you get more advice. And, you know, I think we've kind of figured out that what you have to do is you have to go and do, get a proof of concept, and the others will come along. So that's kind of where we're going. And now that we're just in the planning phase, it's a little bit past the planning phase, kind of a pilot phase. And now they're starting to get interest. And at this point, we have to stay focused to get it up and running and get it going. And others will come, I'm sure of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think when people start giving, and there's been large scale in the disease space in particular, I think that there's often a negative wake to giving. And sometimes in philanthropy generally, like people are not focused on what is the negative ramifications of things that have happened. Because good intention doesn't give you a pass from fiscal responsibility, so you need to be aware of it from that perspective. But even if I think of something like the eradication of malaria in Africa, and there are pretty effective treatments, one of which is bed nets. So organizations send bed nets to Africa, but that assumes two things. Like one, that you have a bed, and two, that culturally you're going to sleep in it, because there are many villages where you sleep on the floor with your children. So the challenge with that is that the mesh that prevents a mosquito from biting you is now being used, those same nets, for fishing rivers, because then culturally they're not using the nets over beds, and now they're changing the ecology of the rivers because they're overfishing because the smaller fish cannot escape the mesh that prevents the mosquito from biting you. So a very good intention, funded well, sent to a place that's being afflicted by a disease, and a totally different outcome than what was anticipated. So Tom, since you work in that part of the world where maybe there are such large cultural differences that well-intended Western donors are not sensitive to, I mean, how do you think about that, and can you give us an example of something like that?
Yeah, so this, I guess, comes, I had the privilege of traveling. I'd never been to Africa, and I had the privilege of traveling with President Clinton. And we did 7 countries in 6 days, which is his schedule, which is incredible. But it was incredible learning, and I think the major thing I took away from it is he said, Tom, never forget we are guests in this country, and be a good guest. And I took that to mean that don't come with your UK or Scottish sense of values and say, I know what's good for you, because I think the UK tried that sometime before and didn't really work out very well. But that's a whole different story.
It's another panel.
And then, but I would, for those of you trying to work this out, one of the other people I invited to the dinner last week was the youngest ever tenured professor at Oxford. He happens to be a Scotsman. Of course he does. He's 29 years old, William McCaskill, and he's written a book called Doing Good Better. And William comes with this way of looking at the world. And so him and I get into a conversation about trying to get kids to go to school, primary kids in Africa and in Malawi where we were working. So we come and we think, oh, well, it's about the classroom. So more people, if we sort the classroom, will come, oh, well, it's about the feeding. Oh, well, it's about the uniform. And so he got the data and he said, Tom, the number one thing to get more kids to go to school there is deworming. And it costs 50 cents a year. And if you can pay for that, Tom, that will move the dial of young kids going to school. And it was just like that one little thing. So we come with our prejudices saying, yeah, that we know what's going to do it. But then when he's been on the ground, he said, no, it's deworming. So being educated yourself and being open to how stupid you are is something that's really important.
Yeah.
And if you can buy his book, he would be forever grateful. But it's a great read as well. It just gets you to think about things from a different perspective.
And I think it's interesting because the author and a friend of mine, Dale Doughton, always says, different isn't always better, but better is always different. So when you're thinking of that, Belinda, like tell us something in your philanthropy that you have found, to Tom's point, that was surprising because you went in it one way and it turned out to be better by doing it a different way.
So previously, a lot of what we've been doing is working with NGOs, so not-for-profits. And one of the things that we're exploring now is opportunistically making investments in for-profit companies. This year, we're going to close a deal with one of the leading edtech companies in Indonesia that has 1.7 million users. And the idea is that if we leverage our education expertise, our teacher training experience that we've had for the last 8 years, and their platform of 1.7 million users and over 80% of the districts in Indonesia, then we're able to scale up much faster in terms of our delivery and get over that scale. So we're changing our previously we thought, okay, we have to work for not-for-profits that are aligned or deliver our own programs directly that are aligned with our mission. But I think we're also keeping that open-mindedness about, this is the goal. What are some of the other approaches that may be more effective, leveraging other ways to get there, right? Including investing in for-profit companies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that is very much something that we focus on at the Institute, is this notion of the recyclability of philanthropic capital, and that everything in philanthropy doesn't have to be a one-way gift or a check written, right? So David, you mentioned the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. For those of you who don't know, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation seeded a number of smaller companies, almost creating a private equity-like portfolio of organizations that had promising but nascent stage therapies and potential cures for the disease. One of those companies ended up developing a molecule into a drug called Kalydeco, and because the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation owned the rights to that, they were able to monetize the royalties for a few $1 billion, which then went back into the foundation. So that, on the one hand, you would think, well, an organization like that isn't set up to invest, but in fact the investment was what gave them the biggest windfall they've ever had.
Sure.
So as you think of the space, David, to follow up on Belinda's point, are you doing things like that are beyond just check writing one way and thinking through how you can invest in a cure or potential therapies?
Yeah, I mean, so as I mentioned, I spend the large majority of my time meeting with the companies. I want to understand what they're doing, what maybe they're just not doing because they don't have the bandwidth to do. So we have done a few investments that kind of look like program-related investments. They're not quite program-related investments, but they do have a royalty return. And our goal is not to get money back. I mean, we have to because we're a private foundation. There's rules called private enormement, which my lawyers can tell you about. I can't. They protect me from myself at times. So our goal really is to get the companies to play in the space. And a lot of times that comes with de-risking, and they just won't go there unless we pave the way for them. The one thing we've been told by very senior leadership of very large companies, once they take our money, we're the last project they want to cut every year when it comes time to budget. Because if they cut our project without failure, they got to give us our money back, and then some. So we really try and play in the space. We're going to continue to do it more and more. It takes bandwidth and more staff to be able to do it. It's not just, we do a lot of, it's not just scientific diligence, it's now diligence on the business side of things. And, oftentimes they're startups, so their balance sheets are what they are. But you have to make, a educated guess and risk and weigh the options, and we're doing more and more of it.
Okay, I want to talk about talent in the space, because I think that's to Tom's and everyone's point, that's a critical component of it. So in the US, with all of those organizations I spoke about and all of the money that goes towards them, the typical way to evaluate that is to look at an organization's 990, which is a tax form that you file in the US, and then try and judge the organization by how little it spends on its talent. Right? This notion of, well, what part of that money is really going towards the issue and what part of it is wrapped up in administrative expenses. And if you think about philanthropy as a business, in my stock portfolio, I would never be saying to those CEOs, go hire the cheapest person you can find to do this work. And if you think about what the philanthropic community is trying to solve, it tends to be the more vexing issues on the planet, disease, poverty, hunger. And yet, the way I'm evaluated is to be cheap. So, Dominika, tell us, because I know this is important to you, like, how do you think about the organizations that you're funding, finding the right talent to tackle these issues?
Well, because I come from entrepreneur family, the fact that the projects I'm supporting are sustainable, or at least they're very effective as possible, it's a crucial thing, of course. But to judge it again, if you take the typical measures which you can take, you use them in philanthropy to evaluate projects. And you can say that if you look at it very mathematically, then the bridge, if you want to invest in infrastructure, support organizations who build infrastructure, the NGOs, like Bridges for Prosperity, for example, that's the NGOs that we are having partnership with, one of them. This is the most efficient project then, yeah? Like every single dollar invested in a bridge, it gives you much more than in all the other cases, because then you're boosting an economy, yeah, in this very region. And it really, changes everything, not just from a personal point of view, but also from an economical point of view. But in many cases, those investments, although in my case I do a restricted fund, it's like a one-time project which we create together with NGOs, with a partner, but you can't really measure the effects they bring in a short period of time. It's just impossible. If you're talking about education, if you're talking about empowering girls, if you're talking about changing the attitude of people, changing their mindset, it's a huge problem in philanthropy to really evaluate projects. Well, if you focus a thing on the philanthropy, which is mainly about social entrepreneurship, that's easier, because then you use more business tools. Like one of the projects we supported was in Zambia. A great person who was a scientist. He wanted to explore a situation of elephants in Zambia. Came over there and he wanted to write his PhD thesis. And then suddenly he's seen that the problem with elephants is not really the elephant problem. It's a problem for the whole society. And why is there such a situation that there are going to be no elephants soon in a moment? Because people are hunting. People were doing that because they were hungry. They wanted to feed their family. So they would love to make money in a different way, because it was quite a dangerous way to make money, but they had no other idea. They had no skills to make different choices. So what he decided to do was like, okay, I'm going to stop focusing on these elephants. I'm going to focus on people, and I'm going to teach them how to farm so they don't have to kill the animals. So he changed something very important for ecology, but he changed something very important for people. He started training those people how to be farmers. He supported them with farm tools, like simple ones. He helped them to water their fields, buying those water pumps, $50 each. It's not much, but well, it's changing everything. Those people, first of all, they were not being killed by elephants while hunting. Secondly, they could feed their kids, send them to school. then again, you have this domino effect, because those people now, they're different people, and the project we did changed the life of 150,000 people over there. So it's a beautiful thing, first of all, yeah? But it's also, in this case, it's a wonderful thing that you can really measure the impact quite easy. How you measure the impact when you support an organization which is supporting girls in Ethiopia. And this story moved a lot of people because we've received 9 awards on international awards for this documentary about an Ethiopian organization who's supporting girls who are being sold as kids to be married. Yeah, they are married off. And how you measure this effect? Well, you first need to help them to be free, yeah, to be able to go to school and to be able to create their life. Yeah? Like this little girl who, when she heard that we're coming over to make a reportage, she just left her home wearing the clothes she was just wearing. She walked through mountains 6 hours. She approached us. She said, like, help me, that's it. That's enough. I don't want this life. I don't want this life for me and for my friends, because I'm 12. I've been married when I was 10. I've been sold. I've been, and since then, I've been raped. I've been working hard in the field. I'm just 12 and I'm a kid. I want to learn. I want to change my life and be sustainable myself. So if you're touching this kind of issues, again, it's a domino effect. Again, you empower these people, but to measure what is the impact, how strong it is, how much she might change the world. Maybe she's second Marie Curie Skłodowska. She was Polish, actually. So who knows, right? Yeah. So it's a huge challenge. But I think you should have partners and you should trust them. Then they know better.
I think it's often, as you said, it's more, the simple things often are more effective. We tend to be drawn towards complexity, thinking that's where the answers are, and it could be deworming or water pumps that are more effective. And just like in business, and I think, Tom, you obviously had a very successful business life, which allows you to be in this
Hopefully
position.
still having it.
Right, okay. But tell us, what lessons from your business life do you apply to your philanthropic life?
Well, I was just going to make a point there. One of the other really impressive people that I've come across was a young man called Sanjay Joshi. And he was first class honours from Cambridge, and he was earning a great deal of money in the city, being an analyst, doing the stuff you used to do, Rich. And but he came to us and said he wants to build a global database of the most effective charities. And he asked for £35,000. It's nothing. And I invited him along to the dinner with the First Minister of Scotland, and I didn't know what he was going to say. And so when it came to his turn, he said, First Minister, I have looked at your international development budget, and I have a proposal for you. So we have this database, and we have researched the most effective charities in the world. So I would say to you, you can sack everybody in your international development team, give us the check, and we will give it to the most effective charities in the world free of charge. Which I loved. And I just thought, this is it. This is brilliant. And his advice to me was exactly what you said, because being Scottish, every penny's a prisoner, obviously. And we would always look at, right, how much is the overhead as a percentage? And he said, are you nuts? In your businesses, do you go for the cheapest talent? And again, how stupid were we? So just that, innocence of youth and having an open mind to go, you're dead right. Mm-hmm. It was really powerful.
That's great.
I forgot your question, but anyway.
Well, you didn't answer it. So, Belinda, let's go to you. What's been the most effective thing that you've done and that you can share with people, and what did you learn about it?
I think one of the things is about building, I think to Dominika's point about building partnership. A lot of the issues that we're trying to tackle are very complex. So it won't be just one organization. One organization won't be able to solve it. It has to be about breaking barriers and breaking silos and working together. There are a lot of, for example, in Indonesia, there are many people working on the issue of education, right? Starting from family foundations, corporate foundations, even companies that are delivering their corporate social responsibility. It's important to have that forum and that safe space where maybe if you don't want to collaborate at the beginning, just to share information to better coordinate with each other, and eventually maybe build enough trust that we can collaborate and do something together. I think that's, over the time, that's one of the things that we've been working on instead of just delivering programs ourselves. Because we're a very action-oriented family, so we said, oh, we want to deliver the programs, we want to see the change on the ground. But now we realize that can only be, that can only create a limited amount of scale, whereas what we're trying to do is reform the whole education system in Indonesia. So we're doing it both partnership top-down, so figuring out from the donor side what we can do to coordinate with each other, but also bottoms up. Because Indonesia is very decentralized, so each of the district manages its, the district head or the regency head in Indonesia is what it's called. They manage their own budget. So as long as we can find a few more forward-thinking district heads, then we can partner with them, and hopefully that can be a way as to inspire others around them to do better as well. So once we do that partnership, I think once you have a proven concept of success, you can create a movement where others will jump in on the bandwagon instead of trying to do everything at scale at the beginning.
This notion of collaboration is often missing from the medical research space. And one thing that we do is we only fund scientists that agree to share their data and progress with others, because it saves a lot of time and effort of people going down rabbit holes. So David, tell us, are you doing anything to foster a collaborative environment in the research you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly tried. I've learned you can't buy collaboration. If they're not inclined to collaborate, it's not going to happen. But I do think funders in general are demanding it, and I think it's starting to get a little bit more airplay, if you will. I was hoping to go back to, you guys were talking about measurements of impact, and I think it's every conference I've ever gone to, you hear people talking about measuring impact and how do you measure impact, and I feel like people tortured themselves trying to measure impact, and at least in the medical research field, there's no roadmap how to get it done, right? So you take some bets. If you're going to fail fast, that's okay, but you have to be able to embrace it. For me, I kind of look at it, you start with your goal, right? Your goal is to get a drug, a device, a therapy to market. Generally speaking, that's what most medical philanthropies want to do. Well, three things have to happen if you want to accomplish that. The FDA has to pay for it, approve it. The payers have to pay for it, and some company has to think that they're going to make money so that they'll manufacture and distribute it. I view progress or impact as moving the needle towards one of those three things happening. I'm not saying you don't set up milestones in basic science grants, but I don't lose sleep torturing myself over the minutia of how do I measure the impact of every one of my dollars. I just don't think it's the best use of time and efforts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certain things like research, it's much harder. If you were thinking about how many students were educated, right, that's a little bit easier oftentimes. Well, we have about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to just maybe pause here and open it up to the audience if there's any questions coming from there. Yes, in the front here.
For simplicity's sake, if we assume that there's three parts to philanthropy, you have an objective, a process, and an output.
Yeah, it's it. Hold on, I was trying to get your microphone.
I doubt anybody wants to hear what I have to say.
Richard will repeat the whole thing, don't worry. Just say it.
Here.
See here?
Right in the front.
If you were going to oversimplify philanthropy and say that you have an objective, a process, and then an output, my question revolves around the actual process. If you guys could kind of just share your general experiences in building the process to where you are now. And then kind of the third part, which is if something goes wrong, you've been defrauded, or people make mistakes. It's one thing if a project doesn't work out, but kind of how do you refine that process with KPIs and other things?
Can I take it?
Yeah, so touch wood, we've never been defrauded yet. Work in progress, I would say. But we're depending on the talent which we're backing, so we can give guidance, we can learn from our mistakes, etc. But we're very much backing the person to go and do this. As David said, if you're going to fail quick, fail cheap, learn and get on again. I mean, it's just like startup businesses which we back all the time. Of course, people are going to fail, but the other thing, to David's point, is learn by doing. I mean, how many times have we saw someone is just getting their business plan or their philanthropic plan, and it's the last cell in the spreadsheet, and I say, guys, come on, just get out and do it and learn, because that's the best learning. You don't learn sitting in front of a computer doing an Excel spreadsheet, for goodness sake. So we really encourage, and I guess that's one of our foundation's key things is we give people permission to fail.
I think the part of the process that people don't often address early enough is, what is my exit strategy if it doesn't work? So at the inception of a funding, people become so wed to the cause and the good nature of the giving that they don't decide how to pull the plug. And I think that's critical to do up front. Like, what would happen that would make me stop funding this initiative or decide to go somewhere else? And you need to know that from the beginning. Is there another question? Yes, right here.
Hi, I'm Patrick Fine. I'm CEO of FHI 360.
We're getting a microphone, 1 second.
Okay. We're a large, diversified nonprofit. We also have our own foundation, which we created by setting up for-profit entities that we then sold and then endowed a foundation. So we are in both worlds. I'm so happy that you raised the issue of paying the actual cost of delivering services. Because what we find is the majority of foundations that we work with have ceilings on indirect costs. So they won't pay the actual they want world-class delivery of services. They want top-flight scientists and project managers. But they won't actually pay the cost necessary. And it creates a very negative dynamic in the organization, because my people then start thinking, we're too expensive. Mm-hmm. We've done a lot of work to benchmark our costs against the private sector. And we find that we actually deliver a very high-quality product for less than a private sector actor would provide it, like McKinsey or Booz or others. Yet we still have this mentality that gets created by foundations that you're too expensive. Mm-hmm. And then that creates a negative dynamic within the organization. Can you all respond and tell me what you're doing in your work to address that issue of paying the actual cost for delivering world-class services?
Well, yes, please.
I'd like to jump in on that. I mean, if you think about it, if what you're trying to do is to change mindsets, to change people, and to change their attitudes towards certain things, people is an investment. It's not a cost. And you have to change that mindset. I mean, because people are basically your delivery mechanism to change, the others around them. So I don't think I would say it wouldn't be fair to the partners that you're working with to consider their indirect costs as an overhead in the traditional sense, because it's actually part of the program. I mean, it's part of your investment back into the cause.
All right, thank you, and thank you for your questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so I want to thank the panelists and keep on the schedule for today, so thank you all.
Thanks.